And I'm here for another live stream Q&A. I was traveling yesterday, so I missed the usual timing. And I just filmed an interview with Brianna Morello, so I'm here with my setup in front of my computer with the lights on, so I figured I would do the live stream Q&A right now. So hopefully it'll go fine. My team is not here supporting me, but hopefully you guys will show up, and I've got a list of questions that I can go over, and we'll just try to wing it and see if we can do this. So the first question is Chris Lumley. Dr. Heider, what's the best option to remove high ferritin levels that seem to be increasing with supplements instead of decreasing? So that's a good question. I actually came across some research once suggesting that even normal levels of ferritin are associated with higher rates of disease, all chronic diseases, heart disease, dementia, everything, all kinds of chronic inflammatory diseases. And the much lower levels, like in the teens, like in 15, 20, in that range, are associated with the best health outcomes. So, our ancestors oftentimes did things like regular bloodletting. So you might want to do some blood donation, So ferritin is the storage form of iron. It can be a little bit more complicated than just iron overload, because you can have elevated ferritin levels as due to chronic disease. So not necessarily, you may not have too much iron, but you may have this storage form of iron being showing elevated, even though there's not a whole body iron overload in cases of chronic inflammation. So ferritin, the storage form of iron in general has some antibiotic and antiviral effects. So your body can use it for fighting off chronic infections. So it really depends on what the cause is. If you do have iron overload, then obviously reducing your intake of iron and actually removing the iron, right? So if you eat a lot of animal protein, as most people in industrialized countries do, you may end up with more ferritin than your body needs, more iron than you need. And even though it's not a sign of inflammation, you may have high ferritin levels. And there's a significant, maybe, I don't remember the exact percentages, probably less than 2%, but some significant percentage of people have genetic predisposition to iron overload, the most severe form of it, and then other people, a significant percentage of the general population, it might even be in the 20, 30 or higher % range, have less severe forms. So not a fully penetrant genetic predisposition to full-blown iron overload, but incomplete penetrance, and they may also have some problems with higher ferritin levels. So these people, and Chris Masterjohn's done some good work on this. So take a look at Chris Masterjohn's Substack, and he's got some great resources on ferritin and dealing with it. We also follow his nutritional protocols along with his lab testing protocols, so we can help people lower their ferritin levels naturally. And part of it might just involve blood donation if it's truly the fact that you have elevated iron in your body. And maybe stop cooking in cast iron pots or pans, and you might need to eat less protein, or less animal protein, perhaps, or eat the same amount of animal protein and just donate some blood more often. And it has been linked also to long COVID. So I think it's not just long COVID, it's all chronic diseases. There may be an element involving iron. So he's also written about it specifically as it relates to spike protein and long COVID and vaccine injury. So take a look at Chris Masterjohn's Substack and his work on this topic. Penny says, I've never had the COVID shots, but I keep getting sick. I'm going to try peptides to see if I can bring my immune system up. I have Lyme disease and things that go with that, so perhaps co-infections. I seem to get pneumonia once a year. Yeah, so peptides are, they're used by the body itself, right? So I tweeted about this recently on Twitter/X. Let me just go and pull that tweet up and read it. So as a kind of like to get into the reply here. Okay, so here's the tweet from April 21st, I think. Mary was tired, so instead of sleeping, she drank some coffee. 20 years later, she's really tired. Some might say burnt out. But instead of taking it lying down, she goes to her good doctor and hypothyroidism is diagnosed. So instead of sleeping, she takes some thyroid hormone. 10 years later, she's really, really tired and all the tests are negative, but chronic fatigue syndrome is diagnosed. So instead of sleeping, she goes on a forum and discovers methylene blue. 5 years later, she's completely disabled by crippling fatigue. A new, improved doctor discovers she actually has Lyme disease. So instead of sleeping, she takes doxycycline. 3 years and half a dozen co-infections later, nothing's working anymore, and she can barely make it through the day. But it's okay. Turns out she also has mold toxicity. So instead of sleeping, she moves to a new house and does some detox. 2 years later, she's hitting the wall again, but it's okay because there's a new peptide therapy, a long-lost bit of cutting-edge research out of the old Soviet Union. So instead of sleeping, she takes that. A year later, she can't even get out of bed, but it's okay because she can still scroll through her phone all day, and eventually she or one of her many doctors will find another hack to eke out a few more months without having to pay back her now truly colossal sleep debt. Now, I know what you're thinking. This sounds kind of like me, but not really, so it must not apply. And anyway, I Googled my symptoms and I just figured out what I'm going to do instead of sleeping. So I know it's kind of, tongue-in-cheek, whatever, but and it may not be sleep that's the problem necessarily, but it's probably part of it for a lot of people. It's basically burning the candle at both ends for decades and decades and decades and not addressing the root causes. So it's about more than just sleep. It's about not addressing the root cause issues leading to your problem and thinking that the problems are different problems. You keep having to do this whack-a-mole over the course of your life. Like one problem, you think you solved it, quote unquote solved it, by taking something like thyroid hormone or a peptide therapy or whatever it is, right? And I'm not saying those are necessarily the things that you did, but you're not really dealing with the underlying root causes. And those underlying root causes are toxins and lack of nutrients. So you can think of sleep as a necessary nutrient. You can think of sunlight as a necessary nutrient. You can think of, too much white light, like these lights that are glaring in my face to make the video quality better, as toxins, right? So it's not that you can completely avoid toxins. I mean, I'm choosing to, sit here in front of these white lights, but I minimize how much time I have to spend in front of these white lights or even indoors at all and spend most of my time outside, and especially don't turn on lights after dark. I just keep the lights off, right? This is natural. Using peptides. So anyway, what are peptides? Peptides are little sequences of amino acids. So if you string together enough amino acids, you make a protein. A small protein, another name for it is a peptide. So it's a smaller, string of amino acids. And insulin is a peptide. Saxenda, these weight loss drugs like Ozempic and stuff, those are peptides. These are all peptides that are in your body anyway, right? Your body uses these peptides as kind of like drug molecules, essentially. It's just, another type of drug. Like I alluded to in that tweet, in the former Soviet Union, they did a lot of work on peptides. And there's tons of peptides the body uses for all kinds of things, right? And some of these peptides act as like a shot of adrenaline in your arm. They just like get you up and keep you going and boost your immune system or do whatever, right? You can find a peptide to do really anything. They're not, you don't have really, I guess, you'll say like, oh, you don't have a ivermectin deficiency. Why are you taking ivermectin? In this case, you can't really say that because, yeah, you might have an insulin deficiency, right? That's why you're taking insulin. You might have a Ozempic deficiency. But you have to ask why. Why, when your body can make this peptide, why is it choosing not to make the peptide, right? So it's doing that for a reason. It's choosing not to make that peptide for a very good reason. And it's not stupid. It's not doing the wrong thing. It's trying to protect you from this crazy situation that you've put yourself in of not sleeping enough and being exposed to too many toxins and not giving yourself the nutrients that you need, like sunlight and proper micronutrients from food, grounding and all the other things, and emotional toxins and weird beliefs about the nature of health and reality. And so all of these things are creating stress on the body, and it's trying to maneuver around that stress as best as it possibly can to keep you alive as long as possible. And as part of that maneuvering, and also it's trying to send you a message that, hey, there's a problem here, help me deal with it, right? So as part of all of that, it is diminishing the level of some of those peptides that might diminish your immunity, right? When you force those peptides back up, what happens? I mean, the body's like, well, I tried to decrease these peptides to begin with, and now you're making them go up again. I'm going to try decreasing them even more, or I'm going to try to decrease the efficacy of those peptides within me, right? So those peptides have to combine with receptors. Like insulin is a peptide, it has to combine with insulin receptors. So when you add more insulin than your body wants there to be, right, it will make itself less sensitive to the insulin. So you're going to give yourself these peptides, and it's really like just pouring fuel on a fire. You're actually making the underlying problem worse. You'll actually decrease your body's desire to make those peptides even more, and it will also make itself resistant to the effect of those same peptides. So the underlying problem the problem will get worse. And whatever's causing the issue initially, like the Lyme, the co-infections, and even deeper problems below those, like why can't your body get rid of Lyme? Probably some emotional issues, some other toxic issues, etc., right? Maybe heavy metals, maybe whatever, right? A lot of different things. Those things persist and themselves will get worse and continue to build up over time because you continue to be exposed to them in most cases, right? Whatever exposures you've had over the course of your life, you continue to have them, generally speaking. So you're not dealing with the underlying issue. So I don't recommend this, right? Go to mygotodoc.com/Hakim, Hakim, and check out a comprehensive natural protocol where you don't need to try meddling around with things that we don't fully understand using things like peptide therapies. All right, Debbie Drong, I think, says, if I had COVID and a shedding thing, is there something I should be doing for this, for my health to be better? I hope there's a replay because I have an appointment. It sounds like a question from last time. So yeah, if you have COVID or a problem with other people shedding on you, there are some simple kind of things that you can do, like nattokinase, serapeptase, turmeric, bromelain, Nigella sativa or black seed, dandelion. Those things can be very helpful at detoxing. And if it's like in your house, then you might want to treat the person who's shedding on you if you have some control over that situation, and try to get out of the situation, or treat the person who's shedding on you continuously. But really, you don't have to fix other people. You can fix yourself so that you become less sensitive to it. So that's the ultimate solution, is to become more resilient. And that, to do that in the best possible way, it really requires a natural deep healing protocol that's fine-tuned to you. So again, you can find that at mygotodoc.com/Hakim if you want to do that. Jim Rather says, is it okay to take nattokinase, serapeptase, lumbrikinase with baobab? I heard Dr. Merrick and Scott Marsland on FLCCC mentioning sipping baobab to combat spike entry into the cells and also to reduce microclot scores. I don't know. That's a good question. Let's see if there's any information on interactions between baobab. Looks like it's in there, so we can, I bet there's not going to be any known contraindications, but, it doesn't mean that it's actually safe. So you just want to be aware that ultimately you need to see how it affects you. And so lumbrokinase isn't even in the system. Nattokinase is there. So let's see. There's no interactions known between baobab, nattokinase, serapeptase, but lumbrokinase isn't included there. So yeah, baobab is a tree, right? So it's that giant tree that stores a lot of water, I think, in Africa. And if I'm not mistaken, it's a tree. Anyway, it's a beautiful, gigantic tree with a humongous trunk, I think. But yeah, I don't know much about what's in baobab tea. All right, so there's a lot of ways to combat spike entry. It's like you can't do everything, right? So do what you can, but there's hundreds of compounds and all kinds of medications all over the world, and herbs and supplements and all kinds of stuff. But yeah, I love Dr. Merrick, Scott Marsland. They're both smart, and Yeah, it's there's a lot of things also that you can do to reduce the microclot scores. So I find it hard to believe that you would be able to further reduce them, beyond the effects of nattokinase, serrapeptase, and lumbrokinase, especially if you titrate up to lumbrokinase and the nattokinase by just adding baobab. But maybe they have more clinical experience than I do. I've never used it or tried it on patients. Patrick says, does microclotting cause fatigue and or foggy brain? If so, what works? What tests to run? Yeah, so microclotting probably does contribute to all symptoms, including fatigue and brain fog. So this kind of ties into the last question. Nattokinase, serrapeptase, bromelain, augmented NAC, or just regular NAC. And if you're using regular NAC instead of augmented NAC, you want to try titrating up to as high as 50 milligrams per kilogram per day in divided doses 3 or 4 times a day. The augmented NAC, you don't need as much. It's probably just need like 600 milligrams a day or 600 twice a day max. And you can also use things like plasma donation. I would do it as often as you can for 3 or 4 months straight. And you can also use things like aspirin and Plavix, of course. And the test to run for microclotting, I think really you should go straight to the microclot test. It's a manually run test using a blood draw, a specific stain, and then use a special microscope. And so this is available from MedHelp Labs. And I don't think you can get it from them directly, but you can get it through mygotodoc.com. There's only one lab that does it. It's the reason it costs like about $500, and the reason it costs so much is because it required a significant outlay upfront of equipment, and also it takes a significant amount of time for a human being to manually do it. It's not something you can just run through a computer or a machine that does the test for you, so it just can't be run for $10, $15. It costs some money to run. So that's the only test that's really reliable for microclotting. You just look at the clots and you see them, and you put do a manual scoring on them. The score is out of maximum score of 4, and then a half point. It goes up in half point increments from 0 up to 4. So usually, what I'll find in people, especially if they haven't been treated yet, or even sometimes if they've been treated already, if you have long COVID or vaccine injury, I've never really seen anyone show up ever that I can think of ever who had a score less than 3 out of 4 before any kind of treatment, and even coming with treatment. So I've seen it go down with nattokinase, serrapeptase, bromelain, NAC. I've seen it go down with plasma donation. So one patient recently, all they did was plasma donation, and it went down from 3 or 3.5 to 2.5 over the course of a few months, and the symptoms also went down. So Tanya says, what can I do for lingering fatigue? 8 a.m. cortisol is low. I can't tolerate hydrocortisone. Made my POTS worse. It made my POTS worse. I feel jittery. I felt jittery, I guess. Can't tolerate adrenal extract or rhodiola. So you really, again, you got to go to the root cause. You got to go and figure out, and part of it is you probably just a sleep debt. You just got to sleep, right? You got to turn off the lights at night because they're very stressful. They're raising your cortisol at night. Even red lights, like nowadays some people buy all these red lights so that they don't have to use blue light at night. Even that raises your cortisol level if it's bright enough. And anyway, just not sleeping is going to raise your cortisol level. So you need to just give up and accept that human beings require a certain environment in order to be healthy. And if you've been, in that dirty fishbowl for your entire life, there's going to be a significant amount of time that you're going to have to just spend recovering from that. You're going to have to sleep. You're going to have to de-stress. You're going to have to maybe change your job. I don't know what you're going to have to do, but it depends on what you've been through in your life, right? So there's the stress of just improper light exposure. It's probably one of the biggest stressors that almost every single person is exposed to, light after dark. Just decide one day, I'm not going to do it anymore. It's not natural, and it's killing me. Even if it's killing me slowly, it's still killing me. So just draw the line in the sand and say, I'm not going to have any lights on. And even if you have to get rid of all the lights in your house so that you never can turn them on after dark, do it. Just don't have lights on. Move everything, up in the day, right? So you're going to wake up earlier, you're going to do things earlier, you're going to eat earlier, you're going to get done by the time sunset comes around, brush your teeth, and just stretch or whatever, maybe read for 30 minutes until it just gets too dark. You can't do anything anymore. And then go to bed. And if you can't sleep in the beginning, get up and leave the bed and sit on a couch in the dark until you feel tired, and then go back to bed. And then, eventually after a couple of weeks, you'll be waking up way earlier, and you'll be able to do all the same stuff you do. It's just, you're going to have to do it at a different time of the day. That's all, right? So that's important. Then there's a lot of other things too, right? It's like, what are you eating? What toxins have you been exposed to? Do you need a detox? All this stuff could be involved. You could have parasite infections. You could have, mold. You could have heavy metals. There's a lot of stuff in it. Really, there's no one size fits all solution. It really depends on where you're at, what you've been through, and what contributed to your exact problem. And it can be fixed, right? So the best way I know of to fix it is just to commit fully, find somebody who really knows what they're doing, who's taken hundreds of people through a protocol of like getting rid of all these toxins and boosting all the nutrients that are deficient, and taking people stage by stage out of this problem into optimal health. And so if you want to do that, the best place I know is with Hakim Shabazz. Again, it's mygotodoc.com/Hakim, Hakim. And just commit to it for like 3 months, and 99% of people will be through it in 3 months. It might take a few months longer if you have cancer or something like that, but really, you'll be really grateful if you just make that commitment to comprehensive lifestyle change, just doing everything he says for a few months. You'll come out the other end feeling better than you ever have in your life, better than you ever thought possible. Bronia says, I would love to know more about MCAS, histamine intolerance to foods, more so since getting COVID again. It's a good question, actually. I spoke about it today with a patient. So MCAS is mast cell activation syndrome. Basically, we have these cells in our body called mast cells. They store histamine and they release it. And even the experts on mast cell activation syndrome can't really explain why you become sensitive to certain compounds and not others, and why your body suddenly starts doing this, right? So, and you can use like mind-body techniques to control this, right? So you can actually train your body not to release the histamine to the things that it was releasing histamine to before. So people, and it's really not that hard. I mean, I recently spoke about it. I had this reaction to bananas for decades. Every time I would eat a banana, only the big bananas in the U.S., not the overseas. They have these little mini bananas. So those never used to give me a problem, or maybe it was just because I didn't eat as much. I had less of a banana, so maybe it took more banana to give me the reaction. But anyway, I'd have this kind of like mild, kind of refluxy, kind of like weird feeling, and just not feel good after eating a banana. And I learned in the last few years, I've learned a lot about mind-body medicine and how powerful the subconscious and the conscious mind are, and your beliefs, how they affect your health and your reality and your emotions and all these things, right? And so I was like, you know what, maybe I can just overcome this banana reaction. And so I smiled, I felt happy. I told myself, bananas are good for you. There's nothing wrong with bananas. They're full of beneficial stuff. And I told my body, I don't remember exactly what I said, but something positive, like enjoy this banana, take good from it, and leave whatever you don't need. If there's anything bad in it, just discard it. And I ate it feeling happy and with a smile on my face. And I didn't have that reaction for the first time in decades. I didn't react to the banana the way I was expecting to. And so people with chronic inflammatory conditions, if they notice, they'll find that some days or some weeks, their problem is like gone, or it's almost gone. It's like 90, 95, 99, or even 100% better sometimes. Like if they go on vacation, or if they're really happy, or if whatever, right? All the stars align and suddenly their problem disappears and then it comes back later, right? It's what people call remitting, it just remits. So what this means is that there's more than just like physical things, right? And there's more than just like, what are the ingredients to make the disease possible? Part of it is stress related. And, there's a lot of toxins and things that have built up over decades, and yet still the disease expression can like disappear or dramatically diminish, especially with long COVID, chronic fatigue, all these things. A lot of people will notice that some days the symptoms are like 50, 75, 90% better, and then all of a sudden they're worse again. And so you got to start wondering, like asking, like, what is that? Why is that? Why sometimes my allergy symptoms are nearly gone and sometimes they're extremely bad. And if you start to really think about it, you'll realize that there is something going on beyond just your exposures, right? So it's not just the physical world. It's not just pollen. It's not just what you eat that causes those reactions. So there's more to it, and it's partly, your mind. Your mind affects your body. So we just have to accept it, and it's been proven. There's no doubt about it. What you think and what you feel will affect your health. So you can undo MCAS without changing what you eat, or without taking antihistamines, without taking herbs, without even getting rid of the spike protein. And the spike protein will oftentimes be like that last straw that triggers MCAS for people. But there were a lot of other straws there before the spike protein showed up. So you can, again, like even with all those straws, you can still overcome your body's, expression of MCAS using mind-body medicine and the power of belief and placebo effects and stuff like that. So it depends on what people are willing to do. If you're willing to learn how to do that, it's not hard. Probably the hardest part of it is just spending time learning about it and convincing yourself that it'll work. I mean, it's like the actual what you do to get rid of it depends on the groundwork that you lay, to make that thing effective. So, I just made up, like a mind-body kind of like approach and like thing for the bananas. I didn't like read it in a book somewhere. It was just like, why don't I try this? And it worked. So, there's going to be a lot of different specific protocols and ways of going about mind-body medicine for allergies. But what probably all of them have in common is convincing yourself that they'll work and reading enough stories of other people who have used that approach to get rid of their physical symptoms, and changing your underlying beliefs about why you have an allergic reaction to certain foods. A more superficial kind of approach is just avoiding histamine containing foods. I mean, that's really trying to approach the problem in a very superficial way. So you're not really dealing with the underlying problem. A deeper way of approaching it is to just remove the last straw, right? The spike protein and maybe some of the other things as well. And your body will kind of go back to the equilibrium it was in before the spike protein showed up, which is not a super resilient state, right? So the next time the spike protein shows up, you can be right back in the same problem again, right? So if you want like real deep, deep-seated health that is not fragile, right? That's even anti-fragile. It's the opposite of fragile. It's like you get even stronger when you're under stress, right? Anti-fragile. Then you need to really address the deepest root causes that go back to probably your childhood. So there's going to be emotional stuff to address, and maybe spiritual stuff and energetic stuff and physical stuff and beliefs and a lot of different things that you gotta detox at every level. You gotta nourish yourself at every level, and then you'll have really anti-fragile health instead of fragile health. Tamissa says, would Ibu ozone therapy help poor circulation in veins and legs not working properly, etc.? So yeah, it may help. It's can be part of a protocol, right? So I can't say whether it'll help you. It can help some people, and it may be effective. And there are much cheaper ways of achieving the same thing. So things like chlorine dioxide and other things could be very effective at achieving the same thing on a significant budget. So yeah, Ibu can be very effective for some people, but I wouldn't just play around with these things. You know, you're going to spend hundreds to thousands of dollars, and it's just going to be like hit or miss. You know, it's not, when it's not part of a comprehensive protocol. You know, people need to learn to value the expertise of somebody who's made a lot of people better, because that person will know what to do when, right? So you'll end up saving a ton of money if you upfront pay somebody who knows what to do when to tell you what to do when, right? And then they will, you know, save you a lot of headache and a lot of expense, actually. So unfortunately, psychologically, we just don't like to do things that way. We like to try things and find something and become convinced that it's going to work, right, on a forum or something. Oh, look, you know, somebody who had the same problem as me, they did this and they got better, so it's probably going to work for me. And you become convinced of it, and then you find more and more evidence to convince yourself that it's going to work. You know, enter this echo chamber, and sometimes it helps, sometimes it doesn't help. You know, most of the time it doesn't really do the thing that you were expecting it to do. And even if it does seem to initially, it doesn't give you that deep resilience. And you just go from one thing to the next, and you can do this for decades. You can do it for most of your life, you know, until you find somebody who really understands comprehensive healing and knows what to do when. So that's what I would recommend. The best person for that, again, I think, is Hakim Shabazz, mygotodoc.com/Hakim, Hakim. Bronia said, and just to remind people, at that site, it's going to be me and Shabazz both working together on every patient that comes in. Whether or not you see me or him for the intake, we'll still both be involved in coming up with the protocols and monitoring and everything. Bronia says, my biggest problem is weight loss. Do you recommend digestive enzyme supplements or histamine intolerance? I'm not sure what that means. Waiting on lab tests, but I do have reactions to high histamine foods since COVID. Any advice would be greatly appreciated. So again, I mean, I can't say whether you need digestive enzyme supplements. Digestive enzyme supplements will be like a crutch. You know, again, it's like you're going to be doing something that your body could choose to do itself, and maybe it's not doing that for a very good reason. We don't know. So using a crutch is not a great solution ever, because crutches by their very nature mean that, you know, if you're using a crutch to take the weight off your leg, it means your leg is not going to need to be strong anymore, and it's going to shrivel away and become, you know, useless after if you use the crutch long enough. So you don't want to use a crutch, because it makes the underlying function, you know, the organ function that you're providing a crutch for, it causes that to become weaker because you're not using it anymore. You don't need it anymore, so it, you know, it shrivels. And with histamine intolerance, you know, could that be related to the trouble with weight loss? Yes, it could be related to it. But again, you want to figure out all the underlying root causes. And, you know, weight loss could be a lot of things combined, right? Like it could be some sort of belief issue could be related to it. You know, there's a nocebo effect from some sort of belief that you have around weight. Oftentimes it's related to some emotional issue, especially if you have a significant other, you know, boyfriend or husband, somebody. And especially in women, just, you know, there's some emotional issues around their expectations for how much they should weigh and how they should look and stuff in modern societies. And then, you know, toxins that have built up in your body can make it harder to lose weight. But everything is interconnected. They're all kind of aspects of the same thing, and they're all pointing you in the same direction. So weight loss, you know, that's definitely something that is really not that hard to crack the code on, but you still need it to be, you know, individualized. You know, there's no like I can, you know, I mean, you know, me just like saying, okay, go and do this diet or that diet. I mean, it's the same as you Googling, really. I mean, like things that worked on different people. You know, there's a lot of things that'll give you a superficial, like, you know, lower weight for, you know, and they might work very fast. Obviously, just not eating for 6 months, you'll lose a lot of weight. You know, if you just go and drink water for 6 months, you'll lose weight. If you just drastically change your diet in any way at all, you'll probably lose weight. But those aren't sustainable solutions, and they don't get to the underlying root cause problem, right? So you want to figure out for you specifically, why is it that you are not losing weight? And it's probably more than just what you think it is. So again, you got to look at, you got to consult with somebody directly. Chelsea says, any experience with SGB, I guess, stellate ganglion blocks? I think that she's posting this probably on the Facebook group, asking people if they've had any experiences with it. If it really works so well, any reason we all wouldn't get it? So it works great for some people, and it doesn't work for other people. So I think most of these things, the best case scenario is they work like 80% of the time, and 20% of the time they don't work. For ivermectin, I think the percentages are better, probably like 90-95% of the time it works really well, and maybe 5% or less it doesn't work that well, or maybe not work at all. So for the stellate ganglion block, most things, the best you can hope for is that 8 out of 10 people will experience significant benefits, and the other 20% won't. So I think it's worth a try if you can, if you're not willing to make deep, sustained lifestyle changes and spend some money up front, to really become, deeply healthy and resilient, or if you're not ready yet to make this, sustained lifestyle and, all of those changes. If you want to try one more thing that, seems like it's quite safe and maybe effective for some people to help kind of reset the nervous system, the stellate ganglion block seems to do this nervous system reset pretty well. Other things can be tried first. You can try the vagal nerve stimulator. You can try a sudden shock therapy, like jumping into an ice bath. That seems to kind of reset the nervous system as well. So you can do other things before you go there to see if those things work. And if not, you can still give that a try. Again, it's a matter of whether you have the money or not. So it costs $500 per side. You don't always have to do both sides, but sometimes if the first side doesn't work, you might have to do the other side. And then, you might have to fly there to somebody who knows how to do it properly, or who's doing it with the right technique and using the right medication for it. And you might have to stay there. So it could end up costing a lot more than $1,000. It could cost multiples of that, $2,000-3,000 with all the travel and all of that. But, it's worth it for a lot of people. Some people, that was like made the difference, all the difference in the world for them. And they didn't have to change everything. I do think that, really everyone should take the time and make the investment for their long-term health and, deep, sustained lifestyle changes. And, an easy way out, like the stellate ganglion block, may end up being worse in the long run, right? Than the person for whom nothing worked and they just finally gave up and they're like, okay, I'm going to change the things I need to change. I'm going to start sleeping better. I'm going to make some, real changes to my life. I'm going to detox. I'm going to, fix all this stuff. And so the people who, sometimes the people who were worse affected by this, they get the most out of it, right? So, and the people who find an easy way out, they just, push things forward and they push the problem to the future, right? The real underlying deep problems are still there, and they've been delayed, so they've been delayed until the future. So stellate ganglion block, I don't think it's curative in the way people think it's curative, right? It gets rid of the superficial symptoms, right? It gets rid of oftentimes all the symptoms that people are having, but it doesn't fix everything inside, right? So there might still be spike protein there, and there might still be a lot of toxins and nutrient deficiencies and just problems that are sitting there waiting to pop up again in the future, 5 months, 5 years, maybe 10 years down the line. Some other problem will pop up and it could have been dealt with, right? in the now instead of delaying it until the future. Lily Vo says, should or could we take fenbendazole or ivermectin or something else just as prevention for cancer? Yeah, I don't think that should be done, personally. Again, like, spend maybe a couple $1,000s in 3 months and just change your life, and you won't get cancer in the first place. Anyway, but some people may say, okay, I just want to take ivermectin once a week for the rest of my life. And, the problem there is that if you're going to get cancer, taking 1 or 2 drugs for the rest of your life is probably not going to prevent it. What it'll do is make the cancer that does develop resistant to those drugs. So cancer is similar to like a virus in that it can evolve very rapidly. And if you kill most of it, like, there will be a genetic change that evades the thing that's killing the cancer, and then the few cells left over that don't die and that actually evolve away to become resistant to the cancer therapy will become the whole cancer, right? So you're actually going to select for a more resistant cancer. So I don't think it's necessarily a good idea. It should be kept, anti-cancer drugs like this should be kept for like an actual case of cancer so that they are actually effective. It's kind of like using, like, okay, I'm not going to get an infection because I'm just going to take antibiotics for the rest of my life. What you'll end up getting is a super infection that's resistant to the antibiotic. So it's one way to think of it. Cole says, I'm not sure, there's like a typo here. I left something about vascular. My legs turned completely purple. There's red patches. It's not Raynaud's. They said I have leaky veins and valves, which is abnormal for my age and usually prominent in 60-year-olds. It's based on wear and tear over time, but not enough to cause my problems. I figured I have blood or circulation issues, no blood clots, but this is alarming. They suggested I get screened for cancer or malignancies. My blood work or things are sometimes abnormal, but not fully out of range or pointing to something. It's beyond frustrating, disheartening. So not a lot of information to go on, but go to mygotodoc.com/Hakeem, and this could be fixed. If you want to do a full cancer screening, you could do the Gallery test for cancer, or just start off with some imaging studies in maybe the pelvis to see if there's any blockages that's leading to this backup of blood in the legs. So don't take it lie down. You can fix this problem. All right, so it's kind of strange. I think I'm not streaming everywhere I'm supposed to be streaming. It didn't actually end up streaming to Twitter, so hopefully it'll show up later. And it looks like it didn't connect to the Long Haul Reset group on Facebook either, so I'm not sure what the problem was this time with the stream, but hopefully next time we'll get that fixed. And I can't even see like live questions right now, so we'll try to fix this for next time so I can take live questions. All right, everyone, thanks for watching.